It's definitely a work of fiction, and there are little shreds of truth in it, but it's not a memoir, and it should be read as a work of fiction. I think with my grandfather, it was more a sense of inspiring the character, I think, and personality, but not the actual events of the story. Especially growing up in America, you learn about the American side of the war, and you think that the turning point of the war was, say, the D-Day battle, when in fact the turning point of the war happened 2 years earlier, and it happened in Russia, where 90% of the German forces were stationed, and the first time the German army was ever defeated in a land battle was outside of Moscow, and then the great defeat in Stalingrad. Like, that was what actually changed the momentum of the war. So it wasn't the Americans, it wasn't the British, it was the Russians, and this was fascinating to me. And the stories of the people who survived the siege of Leningrad were fascinating to me, and I knew very little of this before writing the book. So, and to answer your question, yes, I mean, that's, I think, one of the great things about reading is the opportunity to experience the lives of others. I'm definitely not an expert with economics, so I'd say yes, people are very fearful. Writers, I know everyone's asking, should we take our money out of the bank? Is there a danger that we're going to lose everything if the banks collapse? People are afraid. It's a bad time, and we were talking about this before. The one thing, potentially positive thing, is for an Obama supporter, is that the crisis makes people more likely, I think, to vote for the Democrat, because there is more and more of a desire for a change, and more and more of a feeling that the country is going in the wrong direction. So I think that probably helps Obama with the election. At the same time, you don't want things to be a disaster, only to get the right person in the job. Yeah. Unfortunately, I did not inherit his understanding of finance, and sometimes I've asked him to explain things, and he does, and it's like it's a different part of the brain, because it's like a different language. I don't understand anything he's talking about. So. No, he was many years ago, but he hasn't worked for 2004. He stopped working for the administration, so it's been 4 years. I will definitely vote for Obama, because what's happened, I think, over the last few years has been very bad for my country, and I want to feel proud of my leader again. I want to feel when my president goes around the world that he's welcomed, and that he can speak intelligently to people from other countries, and that he has an understanding of the world and a real curiosity about the world. I think this is essential for a leader, to have curiosity, and for too long we haven't had that. It's true, yeah. It's so I've been meeting with Courtney Love to interview her. I'm going to travel to his hometown, Aberdeen, Washington. Reading all the biographies, and it's, I've loved his music for a long time. I didn't know much about his life except what everyone knew until recently, and again, it's an opportunity to learn a lot more about something that I find very fascinating, because he came from nothing. He came from a very small town and never graduated high school. His family was very poor, and yet he became someone who one of the most famous people in the world, and someone who changed many people's lives with his music. And to me, that's something very inspirational about someone who, was, most of his high school teachers thought he was going to be like just nothing, like he would just, be a bum living on the streets, and no one expected anything from him, including his family. And yet he became, who he was, and his story is very compelling and very depressing, very, very sad. Because he knew from a very early age he was going to kill himself. He talked about it all the time. From the time he was a teenager, he talked about suicide. He used to draw doodles in his journals of him hanging from a noose, or slitting his wrist, or blowing his head off with the gun. And three of his relatives in his family killed themselves. So it was very much a part of his history. Yes. I it was a good review. I think he probably likes my wife, which makes me a little bit nervous, but I don't want to complain about the review, but it took him a while to get to the book. It was more about everything except for the book for a while, but it ended up being a very good review, and it made me happy because he's a Russian, actually. He lives in America now, but he was born in Russia and grew up in Russia and speaks Russian as his first language, so it always makes me happy when Russians respond well to the book, because they understand this story better than anyone else, obviously. Yeah. He says that in the review? That was somewhere else, I think. But yes, it's true story, true story. A friend of mine from my high school knew her through someone else, and he said, "Do you want to go on a date with her?" So it wasn't really a blind date because I knew what she looked like, so it was kind of cheating. But yes, it was. That's how we met. And then I knew I liked her because at the end of the date, she had this plan, and she said, at the end of the date, she wrote an email to the friend who set us up, and she told him the date was a total disaster. You know, this guy David, he seemed okay, but then he started talking about his ex-girlfriend, and he starts crying, and I said, well, maybe you should call her and make up with her, and so he called her at the table of the restaurant, and so she invented this whole fiasco, and then I knew she was funny, so that's when I started to like her. Not yet, I want to. I want to. Maybe I'll see it in Barcelona, but I'd like to see it very much. I'm curious. Have you seen it?